So welcome. I'm Veronica Corpuz, a volunteer with the Greater Pittsburgh Festival of Books, and I'm here today with poet, interim director of the Madwomen in the Attic, Kayla Sargeson. We're here in conversation to talk books, poetry, Madwomen, you name it. This is all in celebration of the Greater Pittsburgh Festival of Books, which will be launching its inaugural year on May 14th. It's a full day celebration of readings, authors, conversations, book signings, and exhibitions of so many of the wonderful booksellers and the entire literary community here in Pittsburgh. And Kayla will be organizing the Madwomen in the Attic poetry tent that will be taking place in Bakery Square in East Liberty. Kayla is the author of the full-length collection First Read and the chapbooks Head on a Shelf, forthcoming, Blaze, and Mini Love Gun, all from Main Street Rag. Her poems appear in the 5 a.m. and South Dakota Review, and with Lisa Alexander, she co-curates the Laser Cat reading series. Sargeson lives in Pittsburgh, where she teaches at the University of Pittsburgh and Carlow University, and serves as interim director of the Madwomen in the Attic writing workshop. So welcome, Kayla.
Thanks, Veronica. I'm so happy to have you in my wacky office. It's still coming together. I just inherited it.
Yeah, well, this is a major first step in transition, I'd say. In the Madwomen history. Can you give us a little bit of background about the Madwomen in the Attic?
Yeah, the Madwomen in the Attic were founded by Patricia Dobler, the late great Patricia Dobler, and the late Ellie Weimard, who just passed a few weeks ago. Pat was the first workshop teacher for the Madwomen, and then once she died, Jan took over, and the Mads really grew. We now have maybe 6 sections of poetry, a few sections of fiction, nonfiction, and now we have a national online program that's really taking off. We have 2 sections of poetry there and a section of fiction.
Yeah, as a Madwoman myself, I find that it's really a unique community here in the city of Pittsburgh, and because it creates a women-only space for writers of intergenerations to have a conversation around poetry, writing, nonfiction, fiction. Tell us about that. Like, was that always part of the original mission of the Madwomen?
The initial mission was to create a space for women that, as you know, we don't really have, and then as we grew and grew, younger people started joining. I mean, I took my first Madwomen workshop when I was maybe 20, a sophomore or a junior in college, and I was the youngest for a while, but now our age range is 18 to 87, and we have several genderqueer and non-binary, Mads as well. So it's really grown, but still is that space, is that space, for us to create. And I mean, it's so important, so many Madwomen, not, in the classes I've took, and in general have said, I haven't had time to write because I had kids at a young age and now I have grandkids and I just don't have time, I just didn't have time, but now is my time.
Yeah, I'd say that's what's beautiful about the community is that, it's not for expert writers or only beginner writers. You can really be in a room with lots of different writers of many different experiences and backgrounds, and the kind of general principle of we're here to write and to take risks and to be vulnerable and to express our voices in a safe and compassionate way is from having experienced the kind of academic side of writing workshops and going through an MFA program where you really can just be chopped down and like red marked in the kind of harsh criticism that can come out of traditional writing programs. I feel like that's just not what the Madwomen are about. And I guess one question I would have, or some folks might have, is why is it Madwomen? Who's the original Madwoman?
It's based on some Madwomen claim the title of the maddest Madwoman, but the title of the program came from the Gilbert and Gubar study about the crazy woman in the attic, and that's where our name came from. And who's to say, who the maddest is? I don't, I think thinking back to like Jane Eyre and, those, stories about, the crazy woman locked up somewhere. And I think it's, it's a cool name, with that history.
Yeah.
I haven't read that study since grad school, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think that having a space to express whether it's madness in the form of rage or madness in terms of mental health, and to be able to share your voice authentically without the judgments or to be held, like scared.
Yeah.
I think that's in out there in the world, to be a mad, raging woman is not acceptable, but it's necessary.
It's not. And there's something about, having a workshop that's all women that is really just nice. Even if we have, nothing fundamentally in common, the one thing we have in common, is that we're in this space away from, the men who, might tell us, which, they do tell us, don't write that, don't say that.
Right.
The patriarchy, really doesn't have a place in the Madwomen workshops. And even when I start my classes off with a poem of the day, it's got to be a poem about, a poem by, a female writer or, a non-binary writer or a genderqueer writer, no straight white men.
Right. I find that's it's like so refreshing to be in that space where you're not feeling like you're going to get mansplained or, told not to write about
that's
being a mother or cooking or taking care of a grandmother or mother, and just the culture of care that comes out of certain feminist spaces that is not accepted in the kind of traditional canon. And that's what when I returned back to Pittsburgh and had been writing in solitary, kind of in my just bubble for a long time, wanting to come back into community and to write and to talk with other women voices was really important and almost life-saving at that particular time in my career. So I thank you, Madwomen, for being so just a source of care and power and creativity that I think is really amazing to have here in Pittsburgh. The festival kind of brings to light the way Pittsburgh is just thriving with literary voices. And can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what's in the rivers? Like, what are we all drinking?
Well, I don't know what we're all drinking. My water's filtered. Well, I don't know. I think you have to change the filters in Brita pitchers, which I don't.
6 months or a year.
Yeah, I haven't changed mine in 10 years. So really, who knows what I'm drinking? But I went to grad school in Chicago, and I studied with the poet Tony Trujillo, who is great, but I moved back, but as soon, I think I graduated and 5 days later, I moved back to Pittsburgh. And at the time, people were like, what do you mean you left Chicago? Like, why did you leave Chicago? I can't understand why you left Chicago. And it's because of the community here. Mm-hmm. because, we have Jan Beatty, we have Toy Darracott, Lynn Emanuel, we had Stacey Waite for a little bit. The literary community is so rich and so vast, that I just, I don't want to say like I feel like at home here, because I think that's kind of a corny thing to say, but there's something going on like every night of the week, especially like at White Whale. Now I think they're doing really great things for the literary community. I mean, and they really do have readings like every day. The Hemingway's summer reading series, it's run by Joan Bauer and Chris Collins, but Jimmy Svedek used to run it, and that was such a big part like of the summer. I would go, with Jan or with my friend Dina November, and and watch, sometimes we'd be there forever, but it was so beautiful. I think it's so beautiful to see people coming together to support everybody, and you never know like who's like friends with who, and it just seems like one of those things that if we have nothing else in common, it's that we're writers and we're trying to do something with our writing. And I think that level of community, and I think that level of support, is essential, for a writer. But it makes Pittsburgh that much special because, there's definitely no Madwomen in Chicago, and I didn't find, I'm sure some people are going to be mad at me for saying this, but I didn't find that sense of community there either. It's here for me. Almost all of my friends, are poets or writers. And I don't see how, even in like New York, I don't see how like the Pittsburgh literary community, could exist. It's just there's really something special about this city. And I know it's not the perfect city, but it is special. And I don't know, what's, maybe it's to the permane sandwiches, which are delicious. Maybe it is something in the water, maybe it's being by the water, maybe it's the wet, I don't know what it is, but this is a city that really cultivates, and supports its community. And I think that's just who we are as Pittsburghers, as people who live in the city.
Yeah, from my experience, right after graduate school, I attended graduate school in Boulder, Colorado, and then went to New York and worked at the Poetry Project there. And that was definitely like a community, a solid base community, but like beyond that, to because the city was so large. And I think also in terms of like the affordability of Pittsburgh and how to be a poet or to be a writer and to be able to live affordably is something that at the time of, this is like over the last 20 years, it's certainly changed. You could do here in Pittsburgh, and
well, I think largely Pittsburgh is still a working class city, and I think, and that's super important, like to my writing, like to my living. I come from my sister, my brother, and I are the first generation in our family to not work in a mill, and so I grew up with the stories. And I feel like my work, and a lot of the, theme around, the Madwomen is that these women have had stories to tell. I believe it was the poet Maggie Anderson, was a visiting writer, and I'm going to get in trouble if that's wrong, but I think it was Maggie Anderson. And people were saying to her, like, how do I get my story out? How do I get my story out? So maybe it's our sense of narrative that makes Pittsburgh special, but we seem to be like a city of people who have a story they want to tell, who have a narrative they want to tell, and the need to tell it that I didn't really feel was in Chicago. And I'm not bad-mouthing Chicago. I plan on going back to visit. this summer. But that working class feel was not there.
Yeah.
And that's such an important part of everything about like my life, and I think that's everything that makes this city so wonderful.
So that reminds me of the poem Monaca, PA, in
Yes.
your book First Read. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. I was going to say, too, you know, even when this past weekend I was visiting my grandmother, you know, almost, I would say like 90% of my family lives in Monaca. It's really strange. And she is the queen, you know, of telling me stories. And sometimes, like, they're stories I've heard before. But she's always got a story about something. And Monaca is an old steel town. So yeah, I'll read it. Monaca, PA. I know black, the cold western Pennsylvania sky, no stars. My grandmother's 2.5 bedroom house in a too grubby to be something steel town with dive bars where you can get a Miller Lite for $1 and Pabst for $3 if you're feeling fancy. Where my dad's a member at the Sons of Italy Club, and he takes me there to drink, well, gin and tonics while he flirts with the bartender. Doesn't come to my defense when the men in the bar try to take me home. My grandmother calls him an idiot, and if there's a hell, she's sure he's going. But couldn't hell be right here when the sun sets above the long-abandoned paper factory? My ex-lover still parks across the street when he picks me up and still smiles when I get in the car. We get high before he drops me off again across the street, and we make plans we may or may not keep for when I come home again. At no later than 11 p.m., my grandma goes to bed. With a cigarette between fingers, I watch TV through the window while she sleeps upstairs, in a blue fleece nightgown, electric blanket on.
Thank you, Kayla.
Thanks for asking me to read that poem. I haven't read it in a minute, and I was just in Monaca.
Yeah. It's what I love about your poems are how like really visceral and gut punching, and you set us in the scene right away, and it's a full range. It's a full trajectory of emotions, particularly in First Read. But tell us a little bit about how do you start a poem like that? Where do you begin? Where do you draw your stories? You know, because they are so narrative based and so many characters, and just curious about your writing process.
Where do I get my stories? You know, a lot of my work, you know, is semi-autobiographical. And, you know, a big part of my writing process is, like, walking around and, like, emptying my head. I was, Jan Baby was my teacher, and she was telling me that I needed, like, a slower, you know, like, less, like, punch you in your face poem for my full-length book, and I wrote Monaca, PA from that. And I remember, like, you know, I've spent a lot of time, you know, on the back porch. My grandma has one of those houses that, you know, they built, I think it was built in the 20s. And so she has, like, a back deck that's, like, over the garage, and then there's a swing. And I used to sit outside and swing, you know, and I'd watch, like, the sun go down, and from that perch, like, you can see, like, the paper factory. And there's something about watching the sunset, I think, in like a town like that. It's like you can see everything at once. And then, of course, you know, my dad used to be a member of the Sons of Italy Club, you know. My dad's a real character. And, you know, I did have, you know, an ex, you know, I hung out with every now and then. But there's a stillness in that town that isn't so much in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was writing that poem, I really tried to play up on that.
Yeah, no, you definitely get the kind of the grit and the beauty of this place and the people.
Yeah, it's somewhere, like my mother grew up in Monaca, and she, would always be like, oh, I hate it there, blah, blah, blah. But I moved, in with my grandparents after I got kicked out of my mother's house. And, it's a town that I didn't expect to, like, help me with things. And again, like, it is, very working class, especially there, which I appreciate. And, as my grandmother gets older, in life, it's somewhere I wonder, like, when she dies, like, am I going to go back there? Mm. So now, I mean, it's kind of, I think places kind of change with us, as we move through our lives. And that little town is a place that's definitely changing.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, they got rid of the Toys R Us, and I can't believe that. Like, I was thinking, like, they plowed over, like, that Toys R Us, and they're going to put a gecko. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's where I got all my Furbies and Tamagotchis and my Hanson t-shirt.
So is the paper mill still there?
Yeah.
It's still operating?
Yeah, but they opened up, Shell opened up a plant, so all these guys, like, moved in, and, like, jacked up, like, the real estate, the real estate of the houses, and my dad actually does security at that plant. Mm-hmm. So they put in this, like, these wacky high-end apartments. I'm like, why would you pay $1,200 a month to, like, live in that spot? But, like, things are changing.
Things are changing.
If that King's ever goes out of business, I'm going to write a whole book dedicated to that King's.
I'm sure there are lots of stories.
Cheesy.
Lots of stories in that King's.
That cheesy hash brown casserole is the best.
My favorite was always the chocolate cream pie at the King's.
Not a frowny.
So I'm curious to see how, poetry has changed in your life. And when did you start? Did you start writing poetry at an early age, or was it in college? Or?
No, actually, I thought I was going to be a fiction writer, which is really interesting now because I could never quite finish anything. But when I, my gram, tells stories about how when I was a little kid, I would, and I couldn't write yet, like, I would tell her stories about, like, what my stuffed animals were doing, and she would, like, write them down for me. And I came to poetry when I was an undergraduate. I did my undergraduate degree here at Carlow, and I was in Jan's Intro to Poetry, because that was the only creative writing class they offered, and I couldn't stand to take any more prereqs. And we read the book, Blue on Blue Ground by Aaron Smith, and, I know, like, he had no idea who I was, like, but I felt like he wrote that book for me, and I just really connected to it. And then my grandfather died when I was 19, and that book was like, that book and South Park were like the only things I could really grasp onto. And I decided that, of course, like, I write for myself, but poetry helps me say the things that, when I was a kid, my mother, told me, that I couldn't say, like, sit like a lady, don't swear around boys and they won't like you, like, and everything in my family is still so hush-hush to this day that I am just obsessed with, like, saying the thing. And when I read an Aaron Smith's book, just, like, opened me up, and I really haven't looked back. And so I thought, well, I'm just I hope somebody, feels what I feel, like, in my work, like, when I was reading Aaron Smith's book. And it was just, that was it for me. ever since. And I started off writing like these really bad sex poems. But now, I mean, I've like taken many classes, you know, in school and the Madwomen in grad school, and, you know, but that class was completely life-changing for me.
Yeah.
And Jan was the kind of teacher who, like she sees people, like she has that gift, and she saw, like, in my work that I was trying to do something. And at the time, like, having that person, like, see me and, like, believe in me made all of the difference.
Yeah, she has truly a gift. I mean, it's incredible to be a student or in workshop with Jan, who really, each person in the room, she can hone in on on what they're trying to do, and she really does see them and witness them in a way that is, like, beyond transformative. I mean, really, healing is actually the word that I thought of when you were saying about truth-telling and, like, the need to speak and give voice to whatever it is that you're feeling or thinking or have experienced, and how that transforms in the work, and then how it can transform into the world, is what I think is one of the amazing things about poetry and writing in general. And so that with that, is there a poem from your new collection that you'd like to share? Something that's...
So I'll read a poem about gardening. I know nothing about... I'm a terrible gardener. Like, I just killed a plant that the guy at the hardware store said was unkillable. But I have a friend in Savannah, Georgia, who has this beautiful garden. It's like... what I imagine, like, the secret garden to look like, but more southern and not, like, British. And this is a poem I wrote for her. Portrait of Sonia gardening. Cutoffs, red tea. I love her fingers in the dirt. Look, there's ferns growing in these bottles. Don't you think the elephant ears are bigger than yesterday? People think I'm crazy. She pulls up potatoes, shows me the avocado tree. It's just, I don't have to think about it. My brain goes quiet. Do you hear the mockingbird? Do you see the cardinal? Look at the dung beetle. Here, water this.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's one of the new poems that will be in your new book, Head on a Shelf.
I wish I had, like, a copy of the cover I could hold up.
Right.
You know, it should be here, you know, within a couple weeks.
Excellent. And folks can order it through Main Street
Yeah, they can
Rag?
order it through Main Street Rag, and they'll be able to order it through White Whale, or, you know, they could come to my book party at White Whale Bookstore on April 1st. And that's not an April Fool's thing. It's really gonna be
drop.
April 1st.
Not April 2nd.
Yeah, everybody's invited. Everybody can come.
Great, and we'll be able to hear some of these poems at the poetry tent at the book festival?
I will be emceeing the Mads.
Okay.
So I won't be reading, but the Mads will, so everybody should come and support the Madwomen in the Attic.
Excellent. That's going to be on Saturday, May 14th at Bakery Square in East Liberty. It's the inaugural Greater Pittsburgh Festival of Books. You don't want to miss it because there are going to be 6 different venues, 40 different authors and writers and poets, tons of hands-on activities for children, for kids of all ages, lots of great conversation, and lots of fun and poetry and madness.
I'm really excited for this.
It's going to be awesome. So yeah, for more information, go to pittsburghbookfestival.org. Join us and support us from now until May 14th. And thanks for tuning in.